So this is written by Michael Mopagan, and the chapter is the best Christmas present in the world. So as we have done the chapter, we will just look at the summary step by step. So what happened? The roll top. The narrator or the author found a roll top desk in a junk shop. It was in a bad condition but cheap. He thought that he could restore it, so he bought it. He began to work on it on Christmas Eve. So what happens? Author goes to a junk shop, and there he found a table, roll top table, but it was not in a good condition. But he thought he could recover it because it was made up of expensive wood. So he just bought it. As you can see in the picture also, the table is there, a person is there. Next, what happens when he brings the table at home? He found something in it, and what it is? The letter. He pulled out the drawers. He found out that these had been badly damaged by fire and water. The man who said it had told him that it was very old. It was of 90th of century and made up of oak. The drawer had stuck fast. He had to use much force to open it. When it opened, it revealed a secret space. In it, he found a small tin box. On the top of the box, these words were written: Jim's last letter, received January 25, 1915, to be buried with me when the time comes. Inside there was an envelope with the address: Mrs. Jim Macpherson, 12 Copper Beeches, Bridport. The date was December 26, 1914. So what happens? The narrator, when it he tried to restore it, the table, he opened every shelf or every drawer, and he has to. It was in a bad condition because it was damaged by fire and water. So just mind it, fire and water. It was damaged by fire and water. So what he did, he just tried to open the drawer by force, and he was able to find out a secret drawer in that. And in that drawer he found a tin box, and in which letters were there, and it was written on the envelope that when I'll die, these letters should be buried with me. And when the narrator opened those letters, he found the address, and all the letters were written. They were written to Mrs. Macpherson. Now, what is in the letter? Now we come to know two characters. First is Jim and Connie. The author read the letter. The owner of the desk must have put it in. The letters had been written by a captain of the English army. His name was Jim Macpherson. He had written it to his wife, Connie. A wonderful incident had happened on the battlefield on the Christmas day. Jim Macpherson had narrated it in his letter. So what was there in the letter? As it is clear in the summary, that those letters which the narrator or author found in the box in the table, they were written by an army officer, English army officer, and his name was Jim Macpherson. He was an English army officer, a captain. He has written all those letters to his wife, and they must be saved or kept safely by his wife only. But something must be happened, so that the lady lost all those letters. So, and what he described in one of the letter, that something today very specially happened today in the battlefield, and what was it, we'll come to know further. So what happened? Now the narrator, the writer of the letter, is describing unforgettable moment. What was the moment? The English and the Germans were at war. This is a scenario of Second World War. The two armies stood in their respective trenches on the two sides of the no man's land. Suddenly Macpherson saw someone waving a white flag from the enemy side. Then he saw many German soldiers calling out to them. They were wishing a happy Christmas to the English soldiers. Some English soldiers shouted back, "Same to you." The English thought that was all. To their surprise, they saw many Germans moving toward them. The captain was alarmed. It could be a trick, but it was not. They were bringing with them German wines and canned meat. Now they had no rifles between there were no rifles between the soldiers. They were hugging one another. The German officer moved toward Macpherson. They shook hands very warmly. Then the German officer said that he was from Dusseldorf and that he played cello in the orchestra. He gave his name as Hans Wolf. In return, Macpherson also introduced himself. He said that he was a school teacher from Dorset. So what happened? What incident the narrator has described, that it was the evening of Christmas. So what strange thing he saw, that they were facing the two armies, enemies armies. They were holding their post. They were on their post, and they were very alert because fight was going on. But instead of fight, one day something strange had happened on Christmas Eve. And what was the strange thing? That enemy army, they they were waving a white flag, and white flag is a symbol of peace. They were waving a white flag, and they were shouting, or they were wishing Merry Christmas. But it could be a trick also. So at first the English, they were not able to believe whether they were really friendly, or they were wishing them Christmas, or it is a kind of trick. Then what happened? Without any rifles, the German soldiers were coming toward them, and they were having canned meat, and they were having champagne or drinks that belongs to German. And then they were approaching toward them. They came near, they shook hands, they wished each other, they hugged each other, and they started talking to each other. So it was a friendly evening. They forget about all about war. What happened next then? So it became a very memorable evening because Dorset and Hardy. So when the two officers met with each other, they started discussing lots of things. And what was that? Hans Wolf smiled. He said he knew Dorset. In fact, he had never been to England, but he knew England. His favorite writer was Thomas Hardy. His favorite book was War from the Madding Crowd. Macpherson shared with Hans Wolf the Christmas cake his wife had sent for him. Hans Wolf said that the marzipan was the best he had ever tasted. It was wonderful Christmas party. So they both were discussing about the literature, writer, places, and they even shared the like Jim also gave him the cake which is sent by his wife. Then what happened? There was a different kind of war or a football match. But they played football. So instead of fighting, they played a football match. Then a soldier brought out a football. The soldiers played while Macpherson and Hans Wolf clapped and cheered. Hans Wolf suggested that the world would be much better if the problem were solved by a football match instead of war. Means what we come to know with this, that these two, they were soldiers, they were officers of two different enemies, two armies, enemy armies, but still they were not in the favor of war. As we all know that war always bring destruction, and it destroys everything. It destroys life, it destroys peace, it destroyed prosperity. So even being a an army officer, Han was not in a favor of war. So what he suggested it would be better if all those matter between the two countries, they could be solved by only a football match. So after the football match, they came together for the celebration. What they did? They celebrated Christmas. After the football match, all the drinks and eatables were consumed. Now it was time to part. Hans Wolf saluted Macpherson and walked away slowly and unwillingly. That night the Germans were heard singing a carol. The English soldiers replied with a rousing chorus of another carol. They exchanged carol for a while and then it was all silence. Macpherson wrote in this letter that he would treasure those moments all his life. So after the football match, they came together, they ate together, they drank together, and they were happy. They were singing Christmas songs. They exchanged, even the Germans were singing Christmas songs, and the English army, they were also singing, and they were exchanging the Christmas song uh, with each other. And after that celebration, they returned to their own camp or posting. And it was silence all over. But Macpherson said that he is going to treasure, he is going to remember, he is never going to forget all those things. He is going to keep it as a precious moment of his life. The hope. And after this event, a hope arises in Macpherson's heart. And what was it? Macpherson ended the letter hoping that the war would end soon. And he was hoping that the war will come to an end soon. Both armies longed for peace, and he was sure they would be together again, because army person, they are also human beings, they are also having families. Even though they are fulfilling their duties toward their nation, but still they longed for their families, even when they are on their posting, or even when they are in the fighting. So they all were hoping as a human being that very soon the war will come to an end and they will return to their houses and they will meet their family. So after that, what happens? The burnt house. The next, we came to know about the burnt house. Having read the letter, put it back in the envelope, he decided to give the letter back to whom it belonged. The narrator, he decided that he is going to return these letters to the person who really owns those letters. The address was of Bridport, Dorset, so he drove to the place. The house, number 12, turned out to be burnt out shell. It was found that Mrs. Macpherson was in the house when it caught fire. The firemen had got her out just in time. She was 101 years old. Now she was in a nursing home. So what he came to know? He came to know about that the house in which Mrs. Macpherson was living, that the house caught fire and everything was turned into ashes. And now Mrs. Macpherson, she was in a nursing home. Then what happened? The narrator, went to meet Mrs. Macpherson to the nursing home. Mrs. Macpherson, the author, went to the nursing home. He met the matron. She said, the author, that Mrs. Macpherson was rather confused that day. They had put her in a conservatory. The author found Mrs. Macpherson sitting in chair. Naturally, she looked up when at the author vacantly, but her eyes lit up when he called her Connie and gave her the letter. So what matron, the nurse, told author, she told that from the early in the morning, Mrs. Macpherson, she is in a different mood. She is puzzled. She is confused. So they had put her into conservatory, and she was little bit disturbed. When the narrator went to Mrs. Macpherson, and she was little confused because she was looking at him vacantly, blankly, because she didn't know that person, didn't know the author. But when she saw that box or envelope, she became happy. And when author called her Connie, Connie, it was her uh, first name, by which only few particular person or few special person used to address her. So she became very happy. He told her how he got the letters, but she was not listening to him. He reached out and looked his hand. And what, when he told that he has brought back her letters, but she was not at all interested in listening how he got back the letters. He immediately reached to the letter She immediately reached to the letters and took those from author's hand. Her eyes returned. She said that her Jim had kept his promise. He had returned on the eve of the Christmas. She made him sit beside her. She kissed his cheek. She talked long and lovingly to him. She said that she had got the best Christmas present in the world. So what? It was the eve of Christmas today also, when the author got the letter back, letters from the door, and it was the same evening. It might be possible that the husband of Mrs. Macpherson, he promised his wife that he will return back by the evening of Christmas, and today was the eve of Christmas, and he came to her through his letters, and she was very happy. She asked the author to sit beside her, and she talked to him for very long, and she was very happy. And at last she said that it was the best Christmas present she could ever get. So this was the summary of the first chapter. I hope that all of you have understood, as we are doing it second time. So with this lecture, I will again provide you the word meaning and question answer of this chapter, so that you people can do in your fair notebook. Thank you, students.